Hi, I'm Martin, this is Not Enough Tech, and today I'm gonna tell you how you're supposed to spend your 15 minutes with Tasker, your first 15 minutes. I assume you don't know exactly how to use Tasker, and don't get discouraged, I've been there as well. Tasker is not the most user-friendly app out there. It's a brilliant automation app, and I used it for several years now. However, to get started with it, it's good to have a great help. And this is why I've created this video. This video also comes with an article when everything is described for you, so you can read it at your own pace along the video and check the pictures if you find anything to be slightly too fast. I took my time, so the video is slightly longer. However, if you want to slow it down, feel free to pause the video, open the link in the description and follow along at your own pace. Now, word of warning, because Tasker, especially with a rooted device, can cause a lot of havoc. You can accidentally cause your system to misbehave by deleting or creating files where you're not supposed to. So bear that in mind. Although it's very unlikely that Tasker will damage your hardware, you might find yourself in a situation when you want to refresh the ROM because you've done something terribly wrong. So before you start messing with the system files, be careful. Tasker is capable of doing that, and you can create problems. With that said, there's plenty of great ways of how to interact with Tasker, and that's what we're gonna do. Before I'm gonna open the Tasker app, I just want to talk about a couple of things with Tasker. Tasker on its own can do a lot of things, but with the help of different plugins, especially auto apps, it can do even more because Tasker itself is limited to a handful of actions. So how the Tasker works? Basically, Tasker it's a watchdog for your automation. It watches the processes happening on Android device and actions them. So you create a watch list of different contexts or conditions or triggers that you want to watch, and then you want Tasker based on these ones matched. You want them to run a task, and the task is a list of actions, and so Tasker will go through all the actions you have assigned to it and execute them one by one, and that can vary from switching your Wi-Fi on and off, from turning battery saving features or sending automatic messages. So for example, if you have a task which basically waits for your mom to text you and send the automatic reply saying I'll text you back in 5 minutes, Tasker will observe everything incoming in terms of text messages, match the text message from your mom, create a reply and send it back to that number. So that's how Tasker works. You have to have a trigger, and then you have a list of action that's going to happen. Now, that's the basic of it. How you're going to use the Tasker, it's completely different to how I'm going to use the Tasker or anyone else. So this tailored experience, what makes a Tasker great, but also what makes it really difficult, because my case uses might not be yours. So with that said, let's get started with Tasker. To use Tasker on your Android device, you have to do a couple of things first. Tasker will ask you for a lot of different permissions. So if you go to the Tasker app and then go to the app settings and permissions, you'll see that I've enabled them all. I've done that before. For the most part, I really trusted Tasker developer, and I have never had a problem running the Tasker throughout the years. Now, apart from the permissions, you'll have to authorize Tasker to use other functions too. So first of all, let's go to the options, and in the options we're gonna have to enable a couple of things. First of all, battery optimization. By default, Android will put and try to optimize the battery for Tasker, so go to all apps and then make sure Tasker does not optimize the battery. Now, most of the permissions I'm gonna be setting right now, sooner or later they're gonna pop on your Tasker screen when you need them. However, I just want to preset them so you would not be bothered and everything would be set for you. So once you've got battery optimization done, we can also go to device admin apps. Device admin apps will allow you to enable the lock screen functionality with Tasker. Once we have this, another thing is display over the apps. you'll find the tasker is there, and this is mainly for scenes and scene objects that we're going to be displaying over another apps. Another thing that we have to enable depending on your Android settings is do not disturb access, and that should be enabled too. Modified system settings, because Tasker is changing system settings when it sets new stuff. And then we have a notification access, also is very important because Tasker can create and read notifications. And lastly, we have usage access, and make sure Tasker is allowed for the usage access too. So those are the basic things that you have to enable before you can actually start using Tasker, and I would strongly recommend you. Now once we have that enabled, let's just open the Tasker itself and start talking about creating profiles. When the Tasker is open, you're gonna see a couple of things on the screen. First of all, at the bottom you have a project tabs. Project tabs, just think about them like a folders. You can put your profiles, tasks and scenes into separate projects. So for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna create a tutorial project. So now everything's created in the tutorial project will stay in this way. There is no advantage of doing this in such way, so don't worry about it. It's just for our reference. Tasker will recognize all the tasks and profile regardless of which folder they are in. You can obviously by hold and pressing the tab, you can add the icon, rename it, or export entire project. Now at the top you're gonna see profiles, tasks, scenes and variables, and we're going to talk about it in details. But before we jump into it, there's a couple of more things I would like to go over in the Tasker preferences. So if you open Tasker preferences, you'll see 4 additional tabs. I've disabled animation and haptic feedback and tips because I don't need it. I would recommend tips to stay for you. You can also disable ask for the new profile name, because you can rename it later if you prefer so, and probably you want to keep the confirm profile deletes and confirm other deletes on for now. I disable it because I know already what I'm doing. In the monitor settings, you'll find that I've enabled notification action buttons, and this is the button here. You can see disabled here on the screen. And also use reliable alarms. This way Tasker will create alarms each time a time context is used. It's very important if you miss any time context. Now in action, you'll see that you have options for quick settings tasks and app shortcuts tasks. Those are basically those extra that you can invoke from these lists. So going back to that, so lastly we have a miscellaneous, and the backups I've set to 1 day. I've authorized Google Drive backups and allow external access. And all of that should be really done before you start using Tasker. Now we are ready to actually talk about Tasker itself. I've noticed we have 2 different folders in here, but I'll be creating in a folder tutorial. Now profiles, you can by pressing on the profile tabs, tasks, scenes, you can import files. A word about importing files: when you're importing stuff from internet, make sure you check what other stuff you need in order to run it. For example, I probably could import a project in here. Let's have a look. Import a project. Let's import project, and I have a tutorial project already saved in here. Now if you're gonna go to Tasker file trees, you'll see that you have a folder for profiles, tasks and projects, and also for scenes as well. Now if you're importing through the project menu, you won't be able to see any profiles. So I know there is a file in here in the profiles folder, however in this folder I cannot see it because the extension is different. So if I go through profiles and access this, you'll see that there is a profile. Now so let's create the first profile. Profiles are the trigger or the context. Tasker will monitor those, and each time one of them is true, it will do stuff that you assigned it to do. Now those 6 different categories we can divide into 2 different ways. We can talk about events, and we can talk about states. Now in here we have application, which is a state. We have day, which is a state as well. Then we have an event, location, which is a state, which is obviously a state, and the time that can be both state and an event. Now what is the main difference? State is something that lasts longer, and you can easily decide when this starts and ends. So for example, a state would be a screen value. So for example, whether the screen is on or off. We can have a state where the screen is on, like right now, or we can have a state where the screen is off. And Tasker can recognize this and assign an exit and an entry task when the state changes. Event, however, they start very quickly, so it's not possible to add an exit task. So for example, when you add a notification, when you get a notification text message, that pops in on your screen and can trigger stuff to happen, but you cannot assign an exit task to this. So for the sake of this tutorial, let's create the first profile. It's going to be a very simple one, and it's not going to be very useful, but it will show how to do stuff. If I click on application and I'll select Play Store. This means every time I open Play Stores, I want something to happen. Now I'm gonna create a new task and call it entry. So this is an entry task that's basically it's gonna start running, and task is like a list of items that's gonna be executed. Those items called actions. Tasker is gonna read every single action and go through it. So let's add an action. Hello. So I've got an action, it's gonna display a hello. How does it look like? I can test it by pressing a play button at the bottom, and you'll see a toast saying hello. Now because this is linked to my Play Store, each time now, because I've saved it or exited the Tasker, each time I enter the Play Store, that entry task will run. So let's test this. I'm opening the Play Store, and we have a hello at the bottom. Now I've mentioned that these can be assigned with the exit task, and when you long press on it, you'll see they have a couple of options. You can move to exit, you can select different task and link it. So I'll show you a neat trick how to speed up your workflow. If you go to tasks, you'll see you only have one, but we have to create another one. So I'll just duplicate this, clone, and then change the name, exit. Now because I don't want hello, I'll say bye. And I will add another action, which is going to be a sound, a small beep. So now we have two actions, and if you play them to test it, you'll see the bye and you'll hear the beep. Excellent. If you want to just test one of these actions, all you have to do is just hold it, select it, and then you can press, for example, this time when I press play, it will play just a beep. Excellent. Now because I've created a task in this menu, it is not linked yet, so I'll save this, go to profiles. You see we don't have an exit task. What you have to do is just link it. So add an exit task by holding down and select the exit. Now save it. You can either save it by pressing checkbox or exiting Tasker. Now when I go to Play Store, it'll greet me with saying hello. And when I exit the Play Store, it will give me bye and a sound. And that was your context, which is a state. Now let's go back to the Tasker and talk more about all the conditions. So those triggers, they can be categorized by doing by other things. So application, obviously it's a state. Day, you can select 24-hour period, and obviously that's going to be a state as well, because at midnight you'll turn into what day that we want, and after 24 hours it will deactivate the event. So this is a state and it works exactly the same. Now events are those very quick events that happens on your phone. So for example, receiving a text message, you can see receiving a text message and you won't be able to add the exit tasks. Now next up is location. Location is basically a state, so whenever you are inside of that location specified by Tasker, you activate a state and you'll be able to assign an exit and entry tasks. Then we have a state, and state, obviously you can pick all this stuff You should also pay attention that the variable can be a state, so you can assign the value of the variable, and I'll be talking about variables in a second. But those can be assigned as a state as well. And lastly, time. Time, depending how you're gonna format it, can be both, can be a state and can be a event. Now, right now, both from and to are set to the same value, 746, which means at 746 it would activate as an event. So it would only allow me to assign one thing. However, if you change the time and create a span of the time, so this is 1 hour span, it will act as a state. Now, it's a good thing to note that we can add more than one trigger. So for example, I can display these messages only when, I don't know, let's say when the time is from now till 48, so for the next minute. So if I save it now, go to Play Store, you'll see that it works, but in 1 minute this will no longer work. While we're waiting for this to happen and confirm, let's talk about more about how many different triggers you can add. You can add up to 4 different conditions. One of them can be an event. It makes sense because it's very unlikely that 2 events would happen at the same instance. So you can add 3 different states plus 1 event, or 4 different states. That's the maximum. Now in here you can see that time is in green. It's because right now it is active. The time just changed into 48, which means in a second this becomes inactive after this changes to 49, and then I won't be able to use this small profile. While we add the tasks and profiles, bear in mind that you can simply select those and move them to a different project file by shifting and dragging them over the folder. Now my folder, the home folder, contains the new tasks. However, this is still linked in a tutorial project, so I can still see the project. However, the tasks are no longer here, they belong to a different folder. So for the sake of this, let's move it back. Let's go to these tasks and move it back to the correct folder. That way you can keep your stuff organized. Now that this changed, the time has changed, so we can confirm that our profile is no longer active. You can see it's no longer green, and when I access the Play Store, nothing happens. Alright, we talked about the tasks and we talked about the actions. You can add as many actions as you want, and each action comes with additional 2 settings, which is a label and if condition. If condition allows you to assign a variable, and if that variable is green, basically if that variable is true, the action will be executed, otherwise the tasker will go to the next stage. Label is displayed in the corner like here on the orange, and can be used for your organization projects, or you can actually use this to create loops. Let's take a look at the scenes. You can create the scenes, which are basically a small user interfaces, created overlays. So let's make one. And on the scene itself, you can add different widgets. So you can add button, you can add a checkbox, and link it to different actions to make it work and perform different actions. So this is really cumbersome and it's not very user friendly. And as a beginner, you're gonna struggle with this. But there is a lot of different plugins that will help you actually get that same functionality without playing with the scene. Now, scenes, tasks, and profiles can be exported and imported. So it's very important that you actually pay attention to what extension files you're gonna play with. If I'm gonna go to my files in Tasker folder, you'll see that profiles, they have extension PRF XML. Projects, they have extensions PRJ XML. And tasks, they have extensions TSK XML. So bear in mind when downloading stuff to check what kind of file you're downloading, so you would know how you're supposed to import it, because you won't be able to import files through incorrect menus from here. So if you're importing scenes, those are scenes files, those gonna be the task files, and those gonna be profiles files, and those project files, so don't confuse those two. Now lastly, the variables. There are three types of variables in a Tasca. We have a local variable, we have a global variable, and we have a system variable. Now when creating a task, you get to create a variable, so let's create a variable. Variable set. Now I'm gonna name the variable age, let's say, and it says that I am 35 years old. Now I'm gonna move it up by dragging it, and I'll want this variable to be displayed. So I'm looking at the variables available, and you can see that the age is available here. Now what's gonna happen when I press the age is going to be set to 35, and we're going to receive a flash age 35. So let's try this. See, it's 35. Now if I'm going to set this to a different value, 36, I'm going to display 36. This is local variable, which means it's being assigned in this point, it's being kept in this point, but then it's no longer relevant to a task and it disappears. So this value is no longer stored. So if I right now disable this task, which you can do it by selecting and disabling, you can see the task is disabled. If I'm gonna flash this, so you see there is no variable value stored. We can change this by using a global variables. Local variables are spelled with the uppercase letters. Global variables has one uppercase letter. So let's do the uppercase. And let's enable this task, and let's change the spelling. Alright, when I press it now, you'll see the same result. However, there's a couple of things that happen. First of all, Tasca assigned the variable and stored it for me, so you can see that the current value of age is 36. Now if I'm gonna go to the same task, disable assigning, and flash the variable, I'm going to receive, instead of variable name, I'm receiving the value because the value is already stored, and this is the global variable. Now lastly, there are also variables which are system variables and assigned by the system. You can take a look at them in here. So for example, let's use a day of the week, right? And we're going to assign it to the age. So now when I enable this, it should say it's Thursday, because today it's Thursday, and it is Thursday, and those values, the system variables, they spelled with capital letters, and you cannot modify defined system variables. You cannot use the same variables spelled the same way, and they are assigned by the system, so you can only use them in a read-only mode. Now lastly, since you know how to get started with Tasca, we're gonna talk about troubleshooting. I would strongly recommend you a couple of things. First of all, check the spelling, and I'm gonna list an article with the most common mistakes in Tasca before you start asking questions online, because you might save yourself a lot of problems. Now to see what went wrong with your Tasca creations, what you can do, you can go here and then go to more and run a log. Start a log and run our task. So let's go back to Tasca. We had our, was it entry? Yeah. We can run it, and then let's go to our log again and see what happened. You can see I've run a couple of things, and they start from the top, from the bottom to, they go from the bottom up. And you can see that we run an entry task. We set the variable, we flashed the variable, and we exited the entry task, and everything went okay. If something went wrong in here, you would see here mistakes and errors that you can trace back and see at what point Tasca is giving you an error. Lastly, one of the easiest ways to import stuff is using Tascanet. So if you go to a website like Tascanet, you can actually download profiles by importing them. So when I hit the import, it'll ask me if I would like to import the file. Yes. Would I like to set it active? Yes, why not? And let's look for it. That was a profile, it was in a project, so we would find it in a default folder. And now you can see we've got a triangle, which means something's missing. Let's investigate. Right, we are missing a auto remote plugin. So I would have to install auto remote plugin in order to deal with this task. You can check what task means. We only set the variable in here, and basically this profile, what it does, it connects to my computer and it tells Tasker which is the computer I am using. So when the computer becomes active, Tasker knows where to send files. If I want to send something from my computer, from my phone to a computer, Tasker has this knowledge because it just set an active PC, and that active PC value gets a name of the PC that is currently being used. So that's one of the profiles I did. So importing profiles like this is very, very simple. So I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover in this tutorial, because this is just to get you started. At the end of this video, I'm gonna link the first profile tutorial that you should go through to create something very, very cool and something useful. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm gonna end this with links to Tasker tutorials for beginners. I've created a couple of different tutorials for beginners which are run at a slower pace, and each one of them has a write-up as well in the description. And these tutorials are gonna be about creating your home profile, creating a smart sleep profile, how to use timers, voice notifications, and how kind of to use profiles, tasks, variables, and scenes in detail. So if you're interested, links gonna be at the end of this video and in this description as well. As for now, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know any feedback that you've got about this video, and don't forget, in the description of this video you're gonna find a full write-up about what we just said. So for now, thank you so much for following me on social media, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye.